And my special guest this evening is Dr. Heather Lynn. And it's always great to have Heather with us. And Heather Lynn is a writer, historian, and renegade archaeologist. She broke away from the mainstream after realizing that much of what we know about our history is based solely on the consensus of the elite, often politically motivated individuals and institutions. Now Heather is on a quest to expose the intricate network of corrupt academic elites, global power brokers, and international banking families that work together to revise human history. And for Heather's research, books, interviews, and more, please visit www.drheatherlynn.com. And please welcome Heather to the show this evening. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Oh, I'm well, thanks.
Well, I'm so glad to have you on this late night witching hour. So thank you for joining us, Heather. It's been a pleasure always when you come on the show. I'm so excited to have you on tonight.
Oh, thanks for having me. I just love to be here.
Well, it's great to have you on. And of course, you've been a busy lady. So tell everybody what you've been up to.
Oh yeah, it's been a busy, at least a busy week. My new book, Land of the Watchers, came out, so I've had a lot of stuff to do with that, and that's been exciting. So a lot of interviews and different things. So I've been all over the place.
Excellent. Yeah, I know you are coast to coast. Cool. So
Yeah.
let's talk about Land of the Watchers. Let's give the rundown on this book.
Land of the Watchers is the sequel, I guess, if you will, to my initial report, the Sumerian controversy. That the Sumerian controversy was when I went into the there was a discovery near the ancient city of Ur, and this was back in 2013. I don't want to say I broke the story because it was actually something that came out on the mainstream AP newswire. But what I did was no pun intended, I dug a little deeper to look at the details surrounding this, because everything that I saw basically was the same kind of script that the AP put out. So you'd see it covered in, the Daily Mail or the Christian Science Monitor, all these mainstream and pop kind of mass, media things, but it was always the same sort of, canned facts. And so I thought, well, this is really interesting. And I had a lot of people ask me about it. So I thought, well, I'm going to go to the source. So I contacted the university who was in charge of the excavations. And it was really exciting. They were going to talk to me and give me an interview. And then I had to submit my interview questions ahead of time. And now mind you, this wasn't a celebrity. I was contacting a professor at the University of Manchester. So I shouldn't have had to go through this much, but I thought, well, clearly he's busy because maybe this is such a big story that he's fielding so many different, inquiries. So I understood. And so I submitted my questions. But before I did, I felt an obligation to, my readers to not ask the questions I wanted to know necessarily, but, kind of get some input, like give a voice to the people. So I said on my Facebook, hey, I'm going to look more into this. Is there anything you want to know specifically? Let me try to contact them and see what I can find out for us. And so I got some questions back and I added those to the email. Now, some of these questions were maybe a little offbeat, if you will, at least in the eyes of the professor. But I thought that, I owed it to my readers to ask these certain questions. Some of the questions had to do with, maybe more alternative archaeology type subjects, like could there be lost technology? Is that what you're looking for, etc. The way I approached this, because I knew that this is a mainstream academic, so I'm not going to ask him, hey, are there stargates? That kind of thing.
Mhm.
So I thought I'm going to ask him in a way that, I can allude to these things, but I thought that I did this so in a professional manner. And I include that an excerpt from my email in the Sumerian controversy, just to kind of be transparent and let everybody know how I approached the situation. So once I did that, and now I I sort of had to go in between with the spokesperson for this professor and all this, and everybody was fine. But once I sent those questions, I think it was a bit of a turnoff. And I knew that was a risk, but I'm not there to impress him. I'm there to I do a job, maybe a self-appointed job, but a job nonetheless. I felt a responsibility on the behalf of other people. I want to ask these questions. Well, I got the cold shoulder really badly. I ended up contacting over and over again, and I was told, well, we'll get in touch with you this day, that day. Never happened. And so I started getting a little irritated, but more so I got suspicious. I thought this shouldn't be that interesting. This is just an excavation. Why can't I just get more details, So that's when I decided that the best thing I could do is, I guess, follow the money, if you will. I started looking at, well, who's funding this? Who's really involved? I understand that it's the University of Manchester, but who else? And so what I stumbled upon was something that was very surprising. I found that the excavation was primarily being funded by Big Oil, a company called Gulf Sands Petroleum. And I thought, well, that's odd, but okay, so they're into philanthropy or what have you. Maybe this is a way they're trying to make themselves look better. But and then I started looking a little more into that, like, okay, well, who's on the board, who's funding this? And then in addition to Gulf Sands Petroleum, I found that it was the British Secret Intelligence Service.
Uh,
And I thought that's a little strange, but okay, let me give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's that they supported it because there needs to be security and logistics. Okay, so there's an excuse. So I went on. Then I found it was some other things like technical solutions company. Okay, that makes sense too. So I kept making excuses because the first thing I think isn't there's a conspiracy. I'm just trying to find out what's going on. And so I end up finding that Price Waterhouse Coopers, this big multinational taxation firm headquartered in London, was also involved. And I thought, well, that's strange, but okay, let's just big companies, they're looking for tax breaks, so whatever. But those all of those organizations together really didn't even make up as much as Gulf Sands Petroleum and as much as the primary funding donor, which was not a company and not an organization, but an actual just person. And that was Baron Lorne von Thyssen of the Thyssen family dynasty.
mm,
And I thought, well, wow, that's generous, right? Still a little skeptical because whenever you hear the names that are familiar like that, you think, well, there has to be a little more here, So, but what is that? I don't know. So I'm looking into this individual, and I find that he's heir to one of the richest families in the world, which I knew, but I didn't really know much about his family. I didn't really spend much time looking into people's families and their dirt and their dirty laundry. But I found that the Thyssen family was quite in some ways nefarious. But everybody has some skeletons in their closet. So I thought, well, that doesn't have anything to do with archaeology. So let's move on. But then I couldn't help but see that his family, and this is widely accepted, this is the Thyssen family has the world's largest and most valuable private collection of relics and art, said to be rivaled only that by Queen Elizabeth. So, I mean, we're talking, this is a private individual, and he has this many artifacts, and he has a penchant for ancient artifacts specifically. So I thought, well, wait a second, that's a conflict of interest in my mind.
mhm.
You're funding this, and what are you expecting to get out of it? Because it's true, there in history there have been a lot of wealthy elitists, if you will, that go out and they fund these things, they collect them, but then they're generous enough to donate them to museums, etc.
Mhm.
But what I found out was that this individual, well, he wasn't so generous, at least not in my opinion. Some could argue otherwise, and I'm just going to put this out here. From my opinion, he is not generous. In fact, I found out recently he opened a retail front in London selling antiquities, selling Greek antiquities particularly. They're the ones that he said he's not quite as interested in. Now, this got mainstream coverage, like, oh, wow, isn't this lovely? And I was like, am I the only one seeing the problem here? Because if you or I went out and got some, say, Sumerian, tablets or some kind of Greek mask or what have you, and we said, oh, this is cool. I think I'll sell this one. I think I'm going to keep this one at my house and show it to all my friends at dinner parties. I think this would not be legal. This is not, this isn't ethical, for one thing. It's not legal.
Right.
Why is he above the law? Well, clearly we know why he's above the law, because of who his family is. I mean, they're very similar to the Rothschild banking family in that they have, a long lineage of members who descend from, Germany, and they come over and they spread all over the world, but they kept very close ties. And Fritz Thyssen, one of the patriarchs, he was the first man to get at the time, newly formed Nazi party off the ground by giving them a huge injection of funds in the mid 1920s. And in 1931, he actually joined the Nazi party and became close friends with Adolf Hitler. And he loved Hitler. He said, this is his quote, Hitler's most important, he is so important. And he said, I realize this based on his gifts of oration and his ability to lead the masses. But what impressed me most was the order that reigned over his meetings, the almost military discipline of his followers.
Gee.
So, I mean, so this guy was like in awe of Hitler, and not just, I mean, he wasn't just one of the people that were like hypnotized by his, you know, speeches and what have you. This man knew enough to realize that, oh, this is clearly propaganda, and I'm impressed with how he's controlling these masses. I must fund him. I mean, this is just disgusting. And so, I look into this a little more, and I find that after World War II, Thyssen, in addition to being tried for being a Nazi supporter, which he, didn't even deny, he actually admitted his support for the exclusion of Jews from German businesses and their mistreatment. I mean, he just said this in court. I mean, he was just a very despicable person. But one of the banking institutions that he founded, in order to help funnel money to the Nazi Party, was an organization called Union Banking Corporation, or UBC. And so UBC was a place where Thyssen strategically installed his friends in positions of power. I mean, and these weren't just any friends. They weren't just little, like, buddies or drinking pals. These were members of what he referred to as the Order.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's
And so,
interesting.
yeah, and I was like, the Order, that actually sounds familiar. So upon cross-referencing the names on the list of his, board at the time, you find that the Order actually referred to the Skull and Bones. And, as maybe your audience knows, the Skull and Bones, it's an undergraduate senior society at Yale University, founded in the early 1830s. It was originally named the Order of the Skull and Bones. So, it's sort of informally called the Order by those who are in the know, I guess. But the men that ran this organization, they were all part of the Order. And in the Sumerian controversy report, I list them. And there's a lot of them. They're Nazi bankers. They're, a lot of people, one of which is a gentleman named Knight Woolley, Woolley. And he was member of the Order 1917 and ended up being director of a trust in New York and director eventually of the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, Woolley is kind of a familiar name in this regard. Going back to Woolley, he was an archaeologist, and not just any archaeologist. He was Sir Charles Leonard Woolley. And in the 1920s and 30s, kind of around the heyday, if you will, of archaeology, he excavated, and a lot of other things. But I mean, he's widely credited and known for his excavation of itself. And so, and something that struck me is, and this is probably just a side note, but it struck me as funny about Woolley is he actually began his career in archaeology as just a layman. I mean, he was a bit of an elitist himself, but he admitted that he had, quote, never studied archaeology methods before, and not even from books. And he had no idea how to make a survey or a ground plan, But anyway, moving on, I think I'll excavate things. And, it was just sort of like, he had the privilege, he had the luxury to be able to go do these things and nobody could stop him. Right. I mean, and this isn't to discredit anything that he did. He, gave us so much information on the Sumerians and his team. They were the one that found just so many of the most important things that we have about the Sumerians. So, what he found actually rivaled anything that was found in King Tut's tomb. I mean, it's a huge discovery. So, I'm not trying to denigrate him when I say that, but I'm just saying that back when archaeology was sort of getting off the ground in a more structured way, it was still filled with people who were basically antiquarians. They were wealthy, men who collected antiquities because they just could, and they found it as a hobby, and they had the means to be able to travel and the money to fund these excavations. Because what they would do, they wouldn't have to really bring too many people. They would go there and take the locals and say, hey, you want to help me, with the grunt work? Here's some money. And, their money went much further, of course, because they basically exploited that type of, I guess, third world labor. So, I mean, the culture and the structure and the history of archaeology is not as scientific, clean, and academic as people would like you to think it is now. And this wasn't even that long ago. We're talking in the 30s, 40s, and even 50s. And it's just one of those things that I found interesting. That here you have Woolley, who was the only archaeologists to be able to excavate that area. And since then, I mean, nobody else has gone in that area until this new excavation that I wrote about. So it was pretty amazing. But here he has connections to the initial, Woolley family, who was part of the order.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just another sort of example of that cronyism that, historians, academics, even in that field, you're not going to get people who are just so good at their jobs and they work real hard and then they get these opportunities bestowed upon them. And no, it's not always it's not always merit based. A lot of the times, unfortunately, it's based on, who you know, the politics of it, and who you're related to. In addition to Woolley and some of these other figures that were just many, many Nazis, there also pops up another familiar name associated with Fritz Thyssen and his bank, his Nazi bank, and that's Prescott Sheldon Bush.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, partner, of course. Yes. Father of George Herbert Walker Bush.
Right. They're in everything, man.
They're in everything.
Gee, money.
Yeah. So, I mean, we go through this and we find that this is just, to be quaint about it, it's an old boys club. And it's not just any, though. I mean, we're talking the conglomerate then of big oil, banking, archaeology, and power. And so you have this like major collector of artifacts and art who is heavily invested in the project at this new site. And so that's something that I thought was strange and it didn't sit well with me. So I looked into it a little further, but still at this point, I'm just looking into it as in maybe just a more of a journalistic sense. Like, okay, let me just see where this takes me and whatever. So I didn't really have a lot of information on, what are their motives? What are they really doing? I could only speculate. And so I put out this initial report back in 2013 to kind of say, hey, no one else is talking about this. Let me just put out the facts as I know them and I understand them. And if anybody else has any information on this, please contact me so I can follow these leads, because I'm, in the States, I can't get to these locations. Nobody can. Like, it's really difficult logistically. Even the archaeologists who are there had a heck of a time getting the clearance to get to this area. So, I mean, we don't know what's going on. So, and this initially happened not just because I had an interest in it, but because somebody contacted me who actually lived in the area and through my Facebook, and they were asking for my help because they said that they saw bags of artifacts being taken out of their, out of the region. And they were very upset about this because they said, this is our culture. And here's like the Westerners coming to take our culture. And, so there was I didn't feel there was anything I could do to directly help, because here I am in the States, just stuck here. I don't know what to do. So I thought the best thing I could do is at least make it known and just put it out there. Well, after doing so, I thought, well, what I'll do is make a follow-up report and just kind of keep up on this. But to my surprise, I was inundated with information. I mean, I couldn't even get through it all. It took me a couple years. I thought, I'll just go through, maybe, the next year I'll put out another follow-up, so on and so on. No, I had to go through mounds and mounds of information, follow some leads that, were dead ends, and then others that were just nothing short of extraordinary. And so I compiled all of those, some of the best, the handful of the best testimonies and whistleblower accounts that I could, and I put them in Land of the Watchers, in addition to, the continuation of my research into this site and what else they found when they went back, because they did go back in, subsequent years just to follow up. And so I go through all that, and instead of just having a report, this ended up being a full, 250-page book. And so like I said, that just came out this week, and we'll see how that goes. But it wasn't an easy road because, I'm trying to think, okay, I'm going to put this out and whatever. And wow, I actually got a lot of, resistance, if you will, about this. I was contacted by an attorney.
Really?
Oh, gosh. I was contacted by attorneys for what I was told was an oil lobby group.
Oh.
And what they did, they didn't tell me anything specifically, like, we're here to, talk to you about this. No, it was very cold and harsh. And it said, I needed to submit my manuscript to them before publishing. And I'm like, are you
What?
kidding me? Who are
Hell
you?
no.
I
Right.
don't even know you. You could be not from an oil company. You could just be some person. Like, I don't know you. This is crazy. But they had an email signature on their email. And so I followed that. And it was actually a law firm. And so I thought, oh, well, that's weird. And I didn't know what to do, and I got a little bit creeped out, and so I ended up calling an attorney. And I'm not a person of many means, so I don't have this like a line of attorneys waiting to do my bidding or anything. And
Mhm.
attorneys are very expensive, so I was like, well, I'm going to call around and see what kind of advice I could sort of get, and for what little means I had, and I got some advice, and the advice that I got was definitely, don't use the names of things, change the names. And some people told me I should just scrap this book altogether and make it a novel and inspired by true events. And I thought, yeah, that probably would be a good idea, but I can't do that. I just
Mhm.
couldn't, I just didn't feel that I could put on a straight face and do that. I would feel like a liar.
Right.
So I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. But I did at least, clearly I wasn't going to divulge the names of whistleblowers, because if I'm getting contacted by oil companies, then Lord knows they will,
Mhm.
if not worse. So I was like, obviously it's only proper etiquette not to give their names out. But in terms of, the other businesses and things that I came encounter with, I thought, well, what do I do? Do I not name names? And this is something I struggled with, and I had to like put this off and put it aside for a little bit and think about this, because in my initial report I clearly did name names. And then everybody, even peers and colleagues in this industry who write about very similar things, they told me, you know what, you probably shouldn't name these names. And I'm like, you know what? But it's not libel, because every bit of information that I have about what's going on and all of these people is freely available online. You just have to look pretty deep
Mhm.
into it.
Right.
And so it's not necessarily easily Googleable, but it's definitely there. I was
Right.
able to access it. So therefore, I thought, I'm covered a little bit at least.
Mhm.
I'm not saying anything outlandish. I'm not accusing anybody. I'm just simply raising questions so that other people can say, what do you think about this? Does this sit well with you, or is it just me?
Mhm.
So I'm just putting it out there because I think that there's just not enough impartial journalism, in general. And
Right.
so I decided to go ahead and publish the names, at least of the companies, because it would be silly if I didn't anyway, because I had already done so in Sumerian controversy. But in terms of some other companies that I ended up indirectly dealing with, or at least representatives of, I changed the individuals' names so
Mhm.
that they wouldn't be implicated. So I had to do a little bit of, legalese in here about, oh, this was inspired by this or that. And so
Mhm.
I had to walk that fine line
Right.
between, and I thought, I got to do this, but I'm going to trust people because they can read, the initial report. They can scour my website and all of my blog posts, and they can hear all my interviews, and they'll know exactly who I'm talking about. It only takes, a Google term away to find exactly who I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And so
Right.
I thought, this is what I'll do. So I ended up obviously not submitting this manuscript to an attorney
Oh
or a group
yeah.
of attorneys.
Good for
Um,
you.
but it just freaked me out a little bit, like, wow, that's odd. And it freaked me out in the sense that I guess it just sort of woke me up. Like, I wasn't scared that the attorneys were going to come after me and hurt me, but it just kind of made me, it paused for a moment, like, wait a second, there's something else here.
Mhm.
So that only, increased my curiosity. So as I
Right.
go on and I'm, researching these things and talking to a bunch of people, I find that I'm being contacted initially by, your average person, your average citizen. A lot of military vets were contacting me. I got a lot of interesting intel from them.
Mhm.
Um, and then just, like I said, average people and whatever. And, I'm going through that. And then I noticed that I started getting contacted by the very people I'm writing about. And that was a little spooky, because I'm like, why do you even know about what I'm writing about? Because I'm just not like I'm some best-selling author on like the New York Times. So
Mhm.
how are you finding out about this? Like, what are you looking through alternative media? Because that's where I go, is alternative media.
Mhm.
So I'm like, they must have heard through alternative media, or how. Like, I didn't ask how, but I got contacted, and I keep getting contacted by people that I just, I'm telling you, I don't even know what to make of it, other than, possibly it's a situation of keep your enemies close.
Mhm.
But, they don't, they're not talking to me or dealing with me as though I'm some sort of threat. In fact, it's the opposite. And this is where it's peculiar. Like, I've gotten some people who were, I mean, as far up as you can go without naming names, but let's just say intertwined with groups and organizations as well known as, say, the International Monetary Fund.
Mm-hmm.
Things that are really big and not seemingly having anything to do with archaeology. So I'm getting contacted by these people, and I'm told, on an individual, not, in a collaborative sense, but just one at a time. Hey, I'm following your work. This is fascinating. I have a lot to tell you. Keep up the good work. Weird stuff like encouraging. And I'm like, well, is this some kind of ploy? Now I'm skeptical because now I just don't trust anything after this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, this is what kind of game are we playing here? And so I don't know what to make of it. I've had some people offer to fund a whole lot of things. And I thought, well, that's a little, that's called deal with the devil if I've ever heard it. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, thank you. Thanks anyway. Moving along, because I'm really not for sale. But I'm wondering, and I still don't have an answer to this, but it just struck me as something peculiar and something I have to kind of put out there, for disclosure purposes, that, somehow these elites, are now interested in this. And so this really put this new take on this, like, well, I'm not trying to make enemies. I'm just simply trying to put this out here. So what is this? I still don't know what to make of it at all. Like I said, is it just they're trying to, keep tabs on me? Are they trying to buy me? Are they trying to hush me? But to be honest, nobody's been anything but nice to me about this. And so it led me to think, well, is there more to this? Maybe, I don't know, there has to be more, until one day somebody else contacted me. And I write about this in Land of the Watchers because it wasn't such a nice contact. It was more of a, I'm not going to go so far as to say kidnapping, but it was sort of an ambush, if you will. Mm-hmm. And this individual, I ended up going to LA because I was contacted by, yet another producer wanting to do a show. I mean, these things happen all the time. And they're these like shows that are just reality based and, all this stuff that, they show on like history and discovery. And this is a big hot trend right now. They're trying to get a lot of people on board to do this. And I guess part of me is so suspicious that it's more disinfo. They want to get people out there for more disinfo. And if I sound paranoid, it's because when I started Sumerian controversy, I was very gullible. I was like naive. I thought, oh, I'm going to put out this little story about archaeology and everyone's going to love it. And then I found that, I got death threats over it and more people were contacting me and it just spun out of control. And I thought, how is this so politically sensitive? Mm-hmm. So, mind officially blown. And so I've had to kind of reconsider all the things that I initially thought. And that includes belief systems, because what I found was, this line of thinking that was, you hear a lot of people say, or at least to me, I was asked, well, do you think there's stargates? Do you think there's less technology? What could be there? What are they looking for? And when you hear that, it's usually people who are fans of late night radio and, a lot of people that are very interesting to talk to and have a lot of great theories, but they're independent researchers. You don't usually think of those theories coming out of the mouths of, MIT professors or, elite government officials. And that's who actually contacted me to tell me those things, were not the people that are so stereotypical or the ones that people just want to kind of, brush aside as like, oh, they're wearing their tinfoil hat. No, not at all. In fact, I started getting information, in this particular interview that I had that was more of an ambush interview. I was led out to LA sort of under the belief that I would be talking about potential for a documentary, the logistics of doing such for Sumerian controversy. And what I found was it was a ploy to get me to hear this one individual out, which I thought was a little over the top because they could have just contacted me, but I was sort of deceived in this way. So here I am in this room talking to this guy, and he was part of an elite family, and he had a lot to say, and he was a bit disgruntled. He was sort of a whistleblower on his own family, and his whole thing was he was very fascinated with this idea of the Watchers and who they were. And according to him, the reason he was so interested in it is because his family was part of a group called the Watchers. And I'm like, okay, like as in what, like Enoch, or what are you talking about?
Hmm.
Um, and he's like, no, the Watchers. And I'm like, I know who the ancient Watchers are, but you'll have to elaborate. And from my understanding, he goes in to tell me that within this closed circuit of the 1%, there are an even smaller group of people who refer to themselves as the Watchers, and they take pride in this. And what they are is they're sort of, at least these are my words, they're aspirational Watchers.
Hmm.
I mean, they believe they are bloodline related to those Sumerian gods and kings.
Hmm.
So they, with pride, call themselves the Watchers.
Hmm.
And why this is interesting is, well, for one thing, it's a little like, okay, these are people who have like, uh, they have a lot of power, and here they're holding on to these beliefs, and this is their like these are their delusions of grandeur, and then that's a little troublesome in and of itself.
Hmm.
So when you go and you look a little deeper into that, and it's like, what are they claiming? What is it that they're watching, and what are these beliefs? Is this just some sort of silly club, or what have you? What I found, and this kind of corresponded with other accounts, is that they're looking specifically for not necessarily stargates and all that kind of stuff, but they are looking for what is known in mythology as the Tablet of Destinies.
Hmm.
And this Tablet of Destinies, it's sort of like one of those symbolic kind of things, like that could, I guess, give power, at least symbolically. And I don't know if they really for real think it's going to give them power, or if it's just something that they want to hold on to, like the Holy Grail, to say, hey, we have this, therefore we're in power.
Hmm.
But the Tablet of Destinies, it comes from Sumerian text. The first time it was mentioned was in an epic poem called Ninurta and the Turtle. And there's no working descriptions of the tablet, but other than the fact it's a tablet. But what's important about this is that in the myth, the goddess Tiamat gives this tablet to Kingu, who then is in charge of her army of what is translated as being star beings. And so the Marduk will eventually go on to battle Tiamat and the star being army, and ends up taking the Tablet of Destinies from Kingu, and then puts it on himself. And so he actually puts it on. So we know that while there's no working description of this tablet, it is something that can be worn.
Hmm.
So it's, I don't know if it's around his neck, but it's supposed to be, on his breast. So it could be on, some kind of shield or chest plate, or who knows. But it leads us to believe that the tablet could at least be worn. So in this poem, this epic, it is Enki who will then go on to possess the tablet. I mean, this tablet is just fought over all over the place, and the reason being is it acted as a single binding law between the gods and man, and that law, what it said was basically you could rule the universe. And so you were the ultimate king. You had the rule over everybody. And in addition to that kind of power, it also gave the holder of the Tablet of Destinies the ability to see in the past and see everything in the present, and then see into the future. So it gave them, complete eyesight, or, the ability to just know, complete knowing of everything.
Hmm.
So it truly exalted them to some sort of, godlike status.
Hmm.
So you could see then why, some sort of elite collector would be very interested in finding this particular tablet. Now, whether or not they truly believe that this tablet is somewhat, magical, is up. I guess only they could answer that. But what we do know is, that if they're looking for this and they want to find this, it will definitely bring them some sort of symbolic power. It's something that, they feel that if they get, it'll somehow legitimize their position.
Hmm.
And so there's a rift apparently in these ruling classes, the ones that are interested in antiquities, at least, to find the Tablet of Destinies, and in addition to finding the tablet, to sort of put themselves out there like they are the true rulers, because they not only have the tablet, but they can trace their bloodline to the kings of Sumer.
Hmm.
which is why they're very much interested in this idea of lineage and the Sumerian king list and these things. So, and that also explains a little bit why there's such an emphasis later when the team from Manchester went back to the area near Ur. They went back and they tried to find DNA evidence and collect that, and
Right.
apparently they did. Whether or not it was any good, there's nothing to suggest that it was or it wasn't. That sort of just fell under the radar. They said they went, collected the DNA evidence, sent it off for analysis, and there's never been anything to speak of after that. So, and of course you could be looking for DNA evidence just for the simple fact that you want to know and be able to research things. There's like paleopathology, trying to understand, ancient diseases, etc. But again, if you look at who's funding this, you'll have to say, well, people who fund it are the people whose their motives that's what's really being taken into account.
Right.
But that's not to suggest that the individual archaeologists on the ground have these same motives or are this corrupt, because it's compartmentalized.
Right.
So it's just it's not something that and that doesn't mean that they're totally guilt free out of this, but it's just sort of the big hulking system that you get these giant corporations or elite families who may have their own motivation for doing these things, and they could be far-fetched, they could be things we would never believe, they could be spiritual in some sense, they could just simply be power mongering, it could be anything.
Right.
But it doesn't matter because they have the means to do things, and they funnel money into the universities in the names of grants and whatnot. And then those people are just happy to be employed and happy to be able to do their work and their research. And so they don't really ask that many questions, because why would they at that point? But what you have to ask is this right? Because, in these initial reports that were given, the reports that come out after the excavation is conducted and the data is compiled, the report didn't go necessarily to some public forum or some kind of a museum, or it first stop that they made after compiling this report was the boardroom of Gulf Sands Petroleum. They presented their findings to the board of Gulf Sands. Now, why? I mean, yes, I guess you owe it to them because they're the ones who funded it. But is this the dynamic? Is this the kind of power that we want to have in the study of our past? Is
Right.
this the balance of power that we want? Or is it, history belongs to 100% of us, not just the 1%?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're all star beings. Any way you look at it, we come from the stars, we go back to the stars, as I always say. So, it's interesting. It sounds like they're just kind of following in the footsteps of Hitler. I mean, they're obsessed with power and immortality. And it's really interesting to see that they were so interested in that quote unquote breastplate. Just to me, it seems like they're insane to some degree.
It seems that way. It seems that, I always say this, when you have, beliefs that are a little out there to other people, if you believe something and, but if you are, maybe you don't have the highest social class or you don't have a lot of money, then you're basically just crazy. But if you have those same exact beliefs and you have a higher social status and you have a lot of money, you're not crazy. You're simply eccentric, which is just a nice way of, so really, why is it that you're allowed to hold on to certain, beliefs if you have a particular, background and social class and status and money? I just think that is clearly the problem. So don't, you look at this, and this is something that really, just resonated with me once I started getting more and more contacts. The people that contacted me, you would see them and they're in their polished suits and they have such an impressive background and they look as straight as an arrow, and here they are saying these things that with so much passion and belief that you wonder, like, okay, well, you're believing this, are you crazy? Is this true? Do you have intel that I don't have access to? Where are the lines of reality here? Because now it's all blurred. Because we see these kinds of figures. This is sort of like an archetypal image of a white man in a suit and holding himself high with esteem and all this kind of stuff. And it's just this archetype of power and affluence and sort I guess sort of sanity and logic and reason and intellect and blah blah blah. And so we just sort of take it for granted, I think, we the collective, just the media, just oh no, these people don't do anything, irrational or logical. They're educated. That doesn't mean anything. Some of the most irrational and illogical people I've ever met came out of Ivy League universities and were brilliant.
Hmm.
So it doesn't really matter. It really matters about what's in your heart, what your spirit is like.
Hmm.
And so the education, social class, status, all that stuff, it's sort of irrelevant.
Hmm.
And so, you know, and in these days, it seems like what we have, because I talk a lot about the elitists, and I do so, and I know it sounds as though I'm sort of, making them out to be some kind of, us versus them thing. But, for one, they started it.
Hmm.
But two, I don't want that to be conflated at all with a sense of anti-intellectualism, because I think those are two different things. You don't have to be elite to be an intellectual. Those are not mutually exclusive. And so when we start hating too much on the elites and then we start sort of hating on the intellectual pursuits of the elites, that's a problem. And I saw this funny meme not too long ago. Somebody passed on to me that said, and this is just silly, but it said like, let's get rid of the man cave and bring back the study. And I thought that's cute, but there's a bit of a sense of truth to that. We don't have to be sort of, uh, embracing this, lower intellect. We can rise above that and enjoy the pursuits of humanity over the past. We can enjoy literature and music and art and history. And we don't have to be elite to do that, because we have free information everywhere. You don't have to, if you have no money to go to college or no time, or that just wasn't in your, plan, it doesn't matter. The internet brings you everything. And the library still, those exist still. You can go there and find everything. And so it really just takes that pioneer spirit. It takes that sense of curiosity, and it takes the ability to realize that you are a free thinking person, and it doesn't matter about if you are elite or you have a lot of money or any of that stuff. And so, and likewise, just because someone is born into an elite bloodline and they were handed an education and they were handed all these opportunities, it surely doesn't make them intellectual by any means. I don't know how many people, PhDs, that, I have dealt with who can't spell to save their lives. And not that that's necessarily an indicator, because let me say, if it wasn't for spell check, I don't know what I'd do. But
Hmm.
but it's just one of those things where it's the irony of it.
Right.
It's just, let's not look at people's status and background and wealth and just assume that they're somehow more logical, and vice versa. So
Right.
that's something that is, a real important point that I like to stress. And I
That's a
found
good.
that to I just found that to be, over and over again repeated in the people that would contact me. And so it started shifting my perspective a little bit. It colored the lens, if you will, when I started writing Land of the Watchers, because I thought, well, now we really need to take these alternative ideas even more seriously. Because for the naysayers that say, oh, the alternative archaeology, there's nothing to that. It's just, it's conspiracy theory, or, whatever. Or it's people who don't have a real explanation for something, so they just make something up to make them feel safe and secure. You hear all of that.
Hmm.
Well, the thing I want to ask is this: if people in true positions of, status and power, wealth, and all those things that people aspire to, if they hold those same beliefs, what does this mean? Now, does it validate those beliefs? Probably not. Maybe so. That's up for other people to question. But what it does do is it makes you simply wonder, and it makes you question that whole idea that, well, the independent researchers, or, these people, they don't know what they're talking about. And anything that has the seal of academia on it is therefore, official and, recognized. And that's not true, because, like I said, a lot of the info that I get comes from the most hardcore academics, and they don't speak out
Hmm.
publicly because they are afraid to simply lose their job or lose their status or political position, however it may be.
Hmm.
So I think what we need to deal with is this quest for the truth. We can't deal with the truth if no one's just living in the truth. So the
Right.
truth of the matter is, these people who seem above thinking about these lowly alternative, speculative activity, no, they're just as in it, if not more. And the most dangerous thing is this: they have the power to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's been my experience, the independent researcher who is interested in this, they're the power that they have, and what they do is they just simply research and try to get to the truth. The people at the top, what they do is just assume that because they thought it's the truth, because they have that sense of entitlement. They were born into that,
Mm-hmm.
which is dangerous, and nobody tells them no, and they can just buy the yes men, which means they can go on and then fund universities, they can fund museums, and I tell this story in Land of the Watchers about how I went to the Hall of Human Origins in the Smithsonian Museum, and it's not just any Hall of Human Origins. It is officially the Koch Hall of Human Origins from the Koch brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So right there, you have to question, well, wait a second. Yes, there's philanthropy. You can say they just want a tax break, or they're trying to do something for the good, but you got to look at where did philanthropy come from? Philanthropy, the origins of that really were in the Industrial Revolution, when Rockefeller and these industrialists were doing horrible things, and they were getting bad press all over the place. They really invented PR, especially the Rockefellers.
Mm-hmm.
What they did, along with the masterminds of propaganda and advertising in the early days, they got together and said, how do we stop this? And the idea was, well, we counter it with more good press so that it sort of buries the bad, just like we do now with SEO. If somebody goes online and says, oh, somebody's terrible, blah blah blah, SEO, reputation management firms, now can go in and code it so that it can't necessarily take it away, but it's just as good when you put out so much good press that it bumps those search terms down to the 20th page of Google.
Right.
Well, that same principle was there, with pad and paper. They said, let's put out so much good press that it buries this bad press. Now, that was the origin of that was the origin of, the PR. It wasn't to necessarily, be really good. It was, they had so much money, they were basically buying themselves good press.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a tradition. So, whereas, yes, okay, Bill Gates and all these people, I'm sure their money has gone to do some good. But when you look at it in comparison to what they've done that was not good, and when you look at the motives behind it, I mean, do the ends justify the means?
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Right.
think so. So, yes, it's the Koch, Hall of Human Origins.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you'll have then when you go into the Smithsonian, you have these, all these skulls of these different, missing links and so forth. And it's just very, a lot of them. And so you have these people, these students and families who are looking at these, trying to figure out where we fit in that spectrum of evolution. And they're reading the little, the side, descriptions, and they're just taking it as, truth. And I'm not saying that, the research behind it is false. I'm simply saying it's a dangerous road when we walk into a corporate funded institution and we just look at what's there, read the plaques, agree with it, say, now I know and I won't question anymore. And we then parrot that everywhere we go.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's history according to mankind's 1%, apparently, spoon-fed lies, if you'd ask me. And it's very frustrating to some degree. I mean, this type of censorship. And then, of course, you look at the artifacts and the ancient artifacts, and some are privately owned. And then, like you said, they're selling some other ones. And I assume that they're probably making a replication of some kind to, if they do donate to some museum, it's not even the real thing.
That's true, and that's actually a widely, accepted fact. And when I was younger, I didn't even realize that. I'd go to some museum and say, "Wow, look at that!" And I was very disappointed to find out that a lot of what's in the museums are just simply replicas. And in fact, you can go online and buy the exact same replicas, and they're beautiful. They're museum copies. You can just have them, own them, whatever. But to me, that takes the magic out of a museum. When you go to the museum, you're hoping to really kind of, I guess, and maybe I'm silly for thinking this because I'm just a history dork this way, but I want to stand in front of an ancient artifact, and I want to look at it, and I want to kind of get the feeling that radiates off that. I want to feel that I'm sort of just but a foot away from our past. I just want to feel that. And if I'm not, I'm looking at just a piece of acrylic, and it's just some kind of copy, I feel duped, and I feel that that's cheap, and I could just buy the thing online and put it on my desk and call it a, just a little thing. It's just not a big deal.
So true. Well, the artifacts, they resonate a frequency, like we were just talking about. It's about the vibrational frequency and signature, and if you're psychic and sensitive enough, you'll pick up on that, and of course, absorb that resonance effect with a cellular memory. Yeah, I totally understand. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
You
I've
do
done
get a
it.
feeling. Yeah,
Hmm.
you get a feeling. It's just, even if it's just like awe and wonderment, if you're not even sensitive enough to pick up anything else, you still have a difference when you look at something real than fake.
Yeah, it activates the DNA at the cellular level, if you ask me. I mean, there's definitely something going on with that. It's very disappointing. I agree. I used to like museums as well, but it's they're not the same anymore. Or maybe they've been like that all along and we just woke up.
Maybe. I don't know. I think, I took a public history was my master's. So I really got into the museum field a little bit, and I saw the dirty side of that because I thought, I'm going to work in a museum. It's going to be wonderful. And I still love museums and I frequent them. But I just wish that things were done a little bit differently, to say the least. I mean, yeah, let's just say this. We talk about the elites buying these things, or laundering money, just however you want to put it, but it's not even just like individuals or corporations. The unfortunate part is it's the museums themselves.
Hmm. Right.
And recently they found a new tablet 5 of the Epic of Gilgamesh, and this was on the news. It was really, really amazing, because this new tablet, the Epic of Gilgamesh is like the oldest epic. It's the oldest story that we have. Um, it it, it had, there's so many different sources for it, but all the sources pretty well go together. They sort of align. But this particular tablet that they found, and I say found with air quotes, because I'll go on to tell you how they really came across this. But this new tablet is it's different. It tells a lot different, it tells more details of the surroundings during the time. So we know that the area in Sumer was a lot more lush compared to how it would be now, but I guess it wasn't clear as to how lush it was. And in this new description, it basically describes the cedar forest as a jungle with monkeys.
Very interesting. And Heather, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back, everybody. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Ravenstar's Witching Hour. My special guest is Dr. Heather Lynn.